And hello again, this is Philip Steiger at thebest3d.com with Project Dog Waffle. Now, Howler 9.1 is out, and I did mention earlier that there is a little bug here with the color picker, actually just the wheel mode. I want to remind you of that because I would really feel bad if you lost your artwork due to a crash in that bug. We're working on fixing that. I'm not quite sure when it will be fixed, but when you're looking at those color pickers, there are so many choices, and all of them work except for one, and that's the wheel selector. And that's if you select the color with the left button, that's fine. You can paint with that color, you can choose a different color. You can change the colors here too. The right button, you can change the color with that as well. Right, so you can paint with the right, but if you right click on the color wheel, not on any other, these work fine, but if you right click on the color wheel, you get a crash, and that will be fixed in a future release. Now, wanted to just hope that you see this video, so because you want to stay away from the color wheel until that's fixed, and that's a bug in 9.1. Apologies, I cannot say anything else. All right, so let's see. What I wanted to do is show a little bit of techniques to create animated video backgrounds. Something like this. Let's focus on that here. So here's a video, double-sided. It's almost like kind of like that movie 2001 Space Odyssey, where towards the end of the movie he's flying into the atmosphere of Jupiter, I think. I'm not sure if I got the movie at the end here, it will go so fast. But I wanted to show you perhaps some ideas on how to create some of that. Now, there are many different ways to do that. In fact, to use it afterwards is perhaps to add a 3D animation on top of it. That too you can do with Dog Waffle. Not really the rendering of the 3D object, but the compositing of this against the new background. So this might be originally a spaceship that you animate in Carrara maybe, or some other 3D animation program, and then you want to composite it against this new background and add some more stuff. This one here I'm doing some trails or some blurring, motion blurs and ghosting that you can see here, and there are a lot of other things we might want to do, like rotate this thing. Animated backgrounds like these can be very useful in any sort of multimedia presentations, and you can take it from there and do all sorts of other funky stuff. Here is some flying through that same data, but taking it into Puppy Ray, the ray tracer, and rendering it. There's some other experiments I've been playing with here. You see this one giving it a bit of a blocky cityscape look. This one here too. Lots of stuff. Okay, so well, in fact, one thing I wanted to do is take an existing image. All right, so let's see. We could start with an existing image if we have one that is of particular interest. If you don't, maybe start with render plasma noise. That one in 9.1 also has a seamless feature, which is very handy. You can do that, turn it into a seamless a little bit later, but it's always good to have it right there already. Perhaps play with something like this. So let's say you want this to be the sort of the basic color scheme that will be the sky flying over your head, right? I mean, so something like this here, as you see here, right? This top part, you want that to be flying over your head. So let's first of all take that into storing an image copy of that. And let's go and put this into an animation. So we'll need to have something like this here. Create an animation. Let's make it a little bit longer. Let's say 99 frames. I'll play over a little bit more than 3 seconds, right? And now I'm going to go to the filter and the transform and Puppy Ray. All right, let's do Puppy Ray GPU right away here. If we have a good GPU, we can do that. Now, the problem is that it's black and white, right? The colors that we had are not actually used as a coloring. It's used as an elevation map. What you see here is the elevation or the terrain coming from the elevation map. So these images, this color is really interpreted as an elevation map, and which means it basically comes equivalent to something like an elevation map, like a grayscale, and that's what you end up having. How do we turn it, how do we make it so we actually have colors instead of just the elevation, or maybe even no elevation at all? Let's do that. Let's put this color map into the alternate buffer, the swap buffer, right? You can use this little S here, or this swap buffer toggle. This will show you, in fact, you see in the upper right corner, you see a preview of the brush image, the paper image, and the buffer, the main buffer or the swap buffer, depending on which one you're on. You can see also here in the at the top of the window title that I'm currently looking at the main image. If you toggle, you're now looking at the swap image. It's basically the backside of your canvas, right? Imagine you have a drawing canvas and you're painting on it on the main front side, and then there's a swap side, the back side. It's kind of a layer underneath it. What we'll do is we'll actually copy that to the swap buffer. You can do that right here from the image menu. Right, so you can either jump to the swap image, which is the same as hitting this button here, or using J for jump to jump from one to the other. And what you can also do is Shift J, uppercase J, you can copy to the swap image. So now what I'm doing is I'm copying it there. In other words, if I toggle, I don't see a difference anymore except up here in the title, because that will tell me whether I'm looking at the swap image or the main image, but they happen to have a copy of each other now, right? It's the same thing. So I'm going to go back, actually I'm going to undo all that. I want to go back to where I had the grayscale image. The elevation map was fine to have here. I'm not sure if I can undo that many levels, if I had enough. No, let's do it without. Alright, let's say we really just need the image, so this image here in the swap buffer. Alright, copy that to the swap buffer. Oh, and I'm looking at the swap buffer right now. Okay, I'm back at the main buffer. Alright, let's create an animation from that. So it's okay to have the colors there in the main buffer, but understand that we will not actually use that. In fact, if we want to do something a little bit fancy, we could perhaps adjust the colors a little bit here with the curves and make it more contrasty, have a couple of spikes, you know, like Monument Valley kind of domes, a couple of rivers and valleys, and we can apply that to the entire animation too. So that filter is now applied to the entire sequence. We don't care about it because we will not actually use this in Puppy Ray. This time we will use just the colors, and I want to show you how to do that. So in the swap buffer we have the colors we really want. In the main buffer we might have something like an elevation, or we might not. Doesn't matter. Let's go to filter and transform Puppy Ray. Alright, and so here's where we can go now and say, well, okay, so this would be cool if we wanted to actually have something like, you know, like a Canyonlands or Monument Valley kind of display and see these monoliths and see these mountains. But we don't. We want to only have the colors that are there. So here's what you do. You go to the scale. You could either do this right here. You could scale the world, and then you can, where is it? There it is. You can scale it down, you can scale it up. You can also do that right there. If you click on more to see more details, you can do that right here. Right, there you go, scale it down to nothing. So now you have basically no elevation, but you still have the colors. The colors come not from the elevation map in the main buffer, they come from the swap buffer. Alright, so let's say we want to now see this a little bit brighter. Right, because we can, oh, I'm still in the scaling mode. Let's make sure we actually reset that, and there you go, flatten it. Alright, so let's go back to moving the camera around. Now if we move the camera around, eventually we'll get to the bright spot here where the light source is. We may not want that. We don't want the lighting, the brightness to change. So pick an area where you like it, and maybe even change the direction. Click here to look around in a different direction. And let's say we will go and, you know, even turn it around like that, upside down. And let's make it so that we have roughly, well, you know, maybe not yet. We'll talk about that later. But so we'll have the ground on the bottom, but we can enable the global illumination. That makes it a bit brighter here all over. We can also disable the light altogether if we don't need that light source really, and we simply want the brightness from the global illumination. The brightness or the coloring of that, the tint, will depend a bit on what colors are actually in the sky. And so if you use something like this reddish sunset, you get a bit more of a reddish tint there too. Let's go This is pretty dark. Let's go with the brighter one here. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to look at just that. I mean, that's something you could do right there, right? You could, for instance, have it go sideways like this. You could do an animation in which we go from, let's say, keyframe it here, go to the end of the animation and move sideways, or maybe move like that, right? Keyframe that. So now we have a little animation where we go from one end to the other, and that's all you got to do now. So let's say we go do animate this, right, and set it for, let's say, high quality, just to do a quick test. And so now it's rendering this animation frame by frame. It's a very slow animation here in this case. You can see it goes in very small increments, but that's where you have total control of how far you want to actually move from one end to the other, or in between with additional keyframes. So I'm going to stop this one here because I really didn't need to see that in this way. I wanted to see something different. What I wanted to do is, let's go do that again. So let's go, again, the elevation map itself doesn't matter. We can actually render on top of this now. So let's just re-render it with another transform puppy ray. This time what we'll do is we'll position the camera in such a way that we have, let's see, give it a little bit faster here, medium quality, there you go. What we'll do is we'll have it point to the horizon with a zoom that doesn't give us too much of that spherical curvature, because if it's a really wide angle lens, it will get a lot of that, right? Zoom 1 or zoom 2, let's give it about 5 or more. That will make it almost flat, right? A nice strong zoom factor. And then we can align the rotate the angle of the camera in such a way that it's essentially horizontal here, and perhaps even go down a little bit below the horizontal line, not too far. There you go. Something like this. So what I want to do is have half of the image showing my sky. Now I could also go down a little bit with the right button. I can change the camera to look up, to move the camera up or down. Maybe I need to then readjust the angle. There you go. Okay, and so I'm going to kill past keyframes, and I'm going to say, let's use this initial keyframe. Let's set and now move forward. Okay, I'm going to need to navigate a little bit like this until I get kind of the direction I want, and go to, oh wait, I need to set the keyframe first here, the position, and do something like this here. Alright, so now I have two keyframes, right? I got all the way here, moving all the way to the other end. And so that's exactly what you'll need to do to the render. Now I'm going to render this a little bit faster this time in medium quality. You'll want to go a little bit faster. Or slower, I mean better quality if you want for the final, except if you are going to use this and then do some more post-processing. Maybe you're going to blur it, motion blur, ghosting, zoom blur, all sorts of other things in light diffusion. You may not need it at the highest quality, really, especially if it's going to be used as a backdrop or background to to some other animation which is going to be in the foreground or focus. This one here may need to go blurry, so let's do exactly that. In fact, let's go to the timeline, and let's say we want to blur. Where is it? There's the blur. Let's do a Gaussian blur, for instance. That's too much. Let's give it just a little bit. There you go. Apply that. Alright, so now we have this blurred a little bit, and there you go. We can FPS for frames per second, play it at the speed like 30 frames a second that you'll eventually have. And now comes the question, well, how do we make this go upside down, right? Flip it vertically. Well, that's something you can do like this here under the image menu, flip vertical, and it will ask, do you want to do that on the entire animation? Okay, that. So now we have what used to be at the bottom, the ground is now at the top. And we have this. Now how about we combine them both together? We have both the ground at the bottom and the ground at the top. There's a couple of ways to do that. We could do some sort of a compositing, and we do have some ways to composite it with this here, combining. You could do a combine with swap, so you could use the animation, save it out to an AVI file or DWA, dog waffle animation, and then load it, select it here under animated swap image, right? Select that so that you have it both in the main buffer and in the swap buffer. And in the swap buffer, or right here in the main buffer, you could flip it vertically again so that it's the opposite of the other one, and then you combine the two together. Well, that's a couple of steps that I'd like to avoid if I am in a hurry. So what I'd like to show you is another technique, which is to simply make it apply the mirror. So I have the upper part is going to be used to mirror down. And I have the option right here. When you're clicking on the paint tool, you have a couple of mirror tools, a symmetry tool. I think we introduced that in version 6 or 7 maybe. And what you have here is kaleidoscopes for painting actually with the brushes, but there's also a horizontal and a vertical mirror. So I'm going to apply the vertical mirror. Boom, it applies it right there. Now as I'm scrubbing, it's applying it too, right? But I might skip some images if I have a lot of frames here, like 1,000. It's possible that I might skip a few, and it's probably safer to actually apply a filter that says let's go render each of these frames, knowing that the mirror is the symmetry tool it has something enabled. So if we go to filter animated, that's something you see in the Howler edition, not in the artist edition. We're talking about animations here with Howler. So animated. You can go to apply mirror. There you go. And so what that does is it forces every frame to be rendered and therefore the mirror to be applied. Now you can go, and don't forget that, now you can go and clear the mirror action, right? You want to uncheck that, or rather just clear that, unchecks anything else, because there might be other options enabled. Uncheck that so you're not doing any more mirroring. And so now you're done. You've got this animation that is showing the top and the bottom filter play the same way. Now there's a lot of other things you could do with that. Sometimes you need to rotate it a little bit, zoom into it, maybe make it last longer. That's something you can do in a couple of ways. You can right click here and go to time stretch, right? And that sometimes works nicely, but sometimes it introduces a little bit of strobing or flickering. So what I also like to try is filter animated motion prediction module. That, if the motion is not too harsh, too fast, this may actually produce some pretty good results too. And so I'm going to do a dry run here quickly and say I need 3 times that many, or 3 tweens, so 3 times that many frame roughly, and let's go and render that. We'll get about 292. Beautiful. This looks just perfect, I think. So what I'll do is I'll say let's go dry run no more and render that. So it's going to actually now make the animation go a little bit slower. We'll have about 292 frames. Now as you recall, the last frame is actually replicated at the beginning. So there are some side effects on that module. You see here this last frame is the same as the first one. So there's a little bit of a jump here, and you'll want to delete that first frame. And then another thing you might want to do, if you need to make this a looping animation, right? It's one thing to be seamless on the edges. You can do that too. But another thing you may want to do is to make it looping so that when it reaches the end, you don't see the jump. Like right now it does. Boom, right there, it shows a jump, right? If I go right here and then I play it, it will jump back to the beginning. Boom, you see that jump? So to avoid that, you can actually make it loopable. Right, so let's do this. Right click on this and make loopable, or actually you can do that in another place too. You can go to animation, frames, right? That's the same menu here that you see here on the frames. It's right here when you go and say make loopable, and basically you say you're going to fade away a certain number of frames at the end and make them overlap and fade into the beginning. So out of the total 290 frames, you'll say let's drop it down to about 237 or so. So we essentially have a fading transition. And that may make it more difficult to see that jump. It may not totally disappear, but it's in this case here, I kind of dare you to tell me where exactly that transition happens. It is visible, but you have to have a good eye. So this is a good technique to make it a sort of a looping animation. And what else could we do here? I mean, we could perhaps add a little bit of rotation to that. At this point, we might say, let's go to the timeline and rotate. Let's say transform. There you go. Now, if we rotate this, there you go, if you turn it, you'll see the edges. This is not tiling it. So one thing you may need to do is actually give it a little bit of room by scaling it up. Right? Make it big enough so that even at this angle you don't see the corners, the edges. So now at this point, let's say if that's the maximum angle you want, you go and click the plus sign right here to create a keyframe, and then you go to the very beginning and you can bring the rotation back, and you could even zoom it down a little bit if you think that you want to actually have it go bigger. But you see, we're flying into it already, so it doesn't really need that so much. Anyway, so here's a little rotation. Make sure it's a linear rotation, and so you can see that we're kind of flying into that. So let's go and apply that. And so now the final idea is to composite that with, I don't know, maybe a spaceship that we rendered somewhere in a 3D program. And I'll just show you an example to give you some ideas. You can go to the brush now and load a custom brush. This is an animation, so animated brush, load an AVI there somewhere, or a sequence if you have an image sequence. I think right now we load Targa and BMP. Hopefully we'll be able to load PNG files someday here too, like we do on the regular animation for image sequences. But right now, if you have the animation in AVI file, that will work too, AVI to animated brush. Let's go do that. And so what I'll need to do is find my where's my programs, where's my data? There it is. Let's go and find the daily dose. I think I have it under Carrara. Is there a spaceship? There it is, spaceship 1. Yeah, there is one, SS1. Let's do this one. Okay, so this is a little animation with 640 by 480 and 600 frames, more than I have in the background animation. So we'll probably skip a few. Let's say we need about 300, I think we had, so about 3, that will be fine. And it's going into the custom brush, which means if you preview, you can see it right there, and it's opaque. This came from an AVI file, so it doesn't have the transparent background. Well, first of all, we need the opacity to be 100%. And then we can go and we need to make the black backdrop, the background transparent. So let's go right click here on the custom brush selector tool. Rather than selecting it, we'll right click it, and that will allow us to change the color or to select the transparent part here. You can make it a little bit more stricter if you want, a little bit more tight, but there's a lot of frames here, so give it a second or two. And so now it's been keyed. If you want that's too much. Let's give it. Let's make sure we don't get the whole thing. There you go. That's good enough. We want to make sure we also store this brush, because in case we pick some other custom brush, we don't want to lose this one. So there you go. So now we can go and render that across the entire animation. That's done from the animation brush keyframer. All right. So with the brush keyframer, you can see a sort of a separate view. Make sure the aspect ratio corresponds roughly to what it should be, and then you can keyframe the first to the last frame right there. And maybe at the end it'll be rotated a little bit, and or maybe even a lot, right? Make it a full spin and make it go smaller and something like this. So here you go. Let's make it also linear. I think this is going to look better. There you go. So now we have this spaceship that was pre-rendered in a different 3D program. We're going to now composite it on top here. All right. So let's go and render that. Where is it? Oh, there. Render. All right. So this is just an idea of how you can create some really interesting combinations. Now the update, by the way, it's still rendering here. You see how it says ne répond pas, not responding. It's because it's just too busy doing the rendering and it doesn't want to refresh the screen here. Depending on how fast your system is, you may see that. But once it's done, you can go and go back to disable the preview and basically scrub through that or see it like so. All right, so thanks for watching.